story. She wakes early, just as the first light is dawning, and she dresses in near darkness, her hands moving carefully over her body. The change that she's been feeling for days now is still there, and she knows that nothing is visible to her neighbors, no telltale signs of curves, nothing that's going to generate gossip, but she's in danger. It's only a matter of time before people know, and then her family, well, Joseph's family will take back the dowry, and her family will be destitute again, and no other family is going to take her in. The shame of it, they'll say, the scandal of it, and it's going to seep into all of her family members, staining them, making them less somehow, making them less worthy. She remembers what happened to Sephora, the girl in the village down the road. She remembers the stones in the hands of her neighbors and the look of hate on her brothers' faces. She's not a fool. She needs to do something. And she knows this. But day after day, she's gripped by a strange sense that the world around her is not what it seems. That she's living in something that's not quite real. And she moves as if she's in a heavy current, her body pushing against it, slow, the air hazy in front of her. It's all indistinct like a dream. And so when the angel appears, his strange glow too bright to look at directly, she has just been counting how many more days she has. She's just been trying to see if she can make it to her wedding night without suspicion, or whether the rabbi can be bribed to find a more auspicious date. That's what her grandmother had muttered to her as she gathered water from the well. When the angel arrives and says, "Greetings, O favored one, the Lord is with you." With her, part of her wants to scream, "Then help me!" But another part of her, somewhere still inside her, says, "Wait, listen." The angel tells her about the baby she is about to have, this child of God that's changing and growing within her. In me, she thinks, and she can feel herself resisting. This is far too strange and unlikely. Her mind rebels. Who do I think I am? Surely I'm ill. Maybe this is a dream. I've fainted and there's some bizarre fever dreams that are coming to me. But she turns again to that silent place, and she knows. And she knows this is true. And it doesn't really matter what she thought before and how outlandish this is. Right at the core of her, she knows it's true. And that it will change everything. And that what she needs to do right now is decide. She just needs to open to this possibility. And so she chooses. And she opens her mouth to sing out her reply, "Here I am." If you've ever tried to stay on a path in life, a path that makes sense, that's very logical, but somehow you find yourself getting pulled away, well, maybe you can relate a little bit to Mary in this regard. I'm not going to try and unpack the whole virgin piece. This is, to me, a story of a young woman who is poor, who has little control over her own life and destiny, who is not powerful under the lens of the society she lives in, yet has the faith and the courage to take up the challenge and the blessing that God has offered her. For some of us, we've listened to stories of Mary, and she's been painted in a certain way. She's been painted as meek and passive and unquestioning, someone who blindly obeys God. Such a dull, quiet figure, that Mary. And it's a real shame, because she's a far more transformative person than that. That's selling out Mary's own involvement in her story And in fact, in the rest of the Bible, we experience Mary as quite a strong presence. She's the only person who argues with Jesus, actually, stands up to him and tells him to make more wine for the wedding. So I don't think this is a weak and meek character at all. And I'm hoping this morning we can maybe let go of that and see if we can see her a little bit more clearly. We know that Mary most certainly was poor and vulnerable, but her conversation with the angel reveals a person who is willing to explore and accept being transformed by God. What is striking in the story is not only her response to the angel, but then the speech that she makes to Elizabeth. And one of the things that is striking about the speech is that it actually happens. We can gloss over that, but when you actually look at the New Testament, most of the time people don't speak. There's very few speeches. The disciples don't make any. And yet we have Mary do one. And it's a pretty robust one, too. She gives basically a full faith confession. She's not somebody who just went, yes, God, I agree with your crazy plan. No, her speech shows us that she actually really understands the full transformative power of God. In her speech, she says that she gets that she looks powerless to the world around her, but that God is investing her with a new power, that God sees her life and her value very differently. She also extends that message to anyone who is powerless, who's oppressed, who's sick, who's weak, and says, you're not nothing, you're actually favored by God. The rich are not who they think they are. The powerful are not who they think they are. This blessing of God extends to all of us. She also gets the idea that Jesus is God made flesh. And that's already pretty strange, but she's experiencing it in her body and understanding that her relationship with God has value and matters. The first line of her speech is really, really important. She says, my soul magnifies the Lord. My soul magnifies the Lord. What she is saying here is her soul, her body, her very life allows us to see the holy, but also allows God to work through something. She's trying to make a statement about the truth of God, that we are in relationship with God, and that God can work in and through us. And when we participate in that relationship, that conversation with God, the laws of our culture that seem so unchanging get upended, and life can look quite different. It can turn a poor pregnant girl into a disciple, and it can make each one of us awaken to a new world that is led and shaped by God. So Mary's speech is delivered with passion and conviction and joy, and it contains the image of a world reversed, a world where the poor are treated well, and that God's love flows through us regardless of who we are. In one way, on a practical level, Mary reminds us that no matter how narrow the choice we have, we do, in the end, always have the power to respond to God's call. And likely it's not going to be something dramatic. We're probably not going to become pregnant with Jesus, for example. But make no mistake, God can call to us in many strange and very practical ways. And in my own case, it wasn't particularly wild or exciting. I think I've mentioned before that when I grew up, we didn't go to church. We weren't a church-involved family in any way. My parents always knew that I had some sort of leaning towards spirituality. I can remember as a little girl feeling the holy everywhere. And so I tried a few experiments with church. They didn't go particularly well. And I tried a few other ways of trying to develop spirituality. I practiced Buddhism. I joined a meditation group. I was part of an intentional community for 2 years. So like many 20-somethings, I went out and sought and sought. And in that time, I also really wanted to make a living. I'd gone to university and I'd given a good shot at radio journalism. I was very tired of being that level of poor. It's one of the worst paying jobs you can have. So I got to this point where I'm like, that's nice about all that spirituality stuff, and I can feel God calling, but it's pretty weird. I don't even know if I'm religious. I don't even know if I'm Christian. So I focus on my career. And I break into the world of public relations, which has got to be the opposite of what I'm doing now. And I lucked out and found a small firm that was ethical. I had great bosses, 2 amazing women, and they served sectors that I cared about, the healthcare sector and the government. And the work was interesting. I would train medical doctors and researchers to do media interviews and launch social programs for the province, in between some more dull things. And so I'm working away, and I am getting slowly and slowly more miserable. And I cannot figure out why. There is nothing wrong with my life. If I go to a party and tell people what I do, they're like, you're so lucky. You do meaningful work. But I can feel it all through me. And 3 years in, I get the true test. I get the offer that any young entrepreneur dreams of. The 2 owners offer me the company. And so I'm standing there in the top floor of a Gastown high-rise, looking at the water, and they're offering me what I should want. And all I feel through me is a big, loud no. And so I quit, basically. So I realized in that moment I had been ignoring God's call to ministry. And that it actually really didn't matter whether I was sure or not if I was Christian, whether I was sure or not if this was a good idea, whether I knew how to do this, it didn't matter. That the call was there, and the more I ignored it, the more this wasn't working anyway. And once I answered that call, it was a bit astounding at what happened. I cannot believe the amount of doors that opened. I won a full scholarship within minutes of applying, and the doors flew open, and somehow it all managed to come to this conclusion. And I have to say, I'm so happy. But what it makes us realize is, in Mary's case, she does have a choice that she can make. A lot of people like to say she was pregnant and unwed, and there was no choice for her. But there was. She didn't have to give herself fully to this strange role that God had given her. She did have to decide. She had to decide if she was brave enough to take it. She had to practice the art of surrendering to this strange vision that God had for her, and then embodying it, because she could have decided she was dreaming that day. She could have said no to the angel. The God we encounter in the Bible and in the world often gives us a choice. We have a choice of how we might listen to God and respond. We have a choice in large ways or small to turn our lives over to God, and then perhaps through that act, change the world. So when we go out today, may we choose to let our lives, our actions, and our souls magnify the Lord. May we choose to bring joy and hope to this broken and suffering world. Amen. Let's take a moment to shut our eyes and pray. There are some blessings that are only revealed to us when the day is darkest. There are some mercies that only shine when the shadows are deepest. There are some graces that are only glimpsed when the night is longest. In Advent, we remember the darkest days and await the brilliant light of hope. In Advent, we remember the thirsty days and await the quenching light of peace. In Advent, we remember the silent days and await the singing light of joy. Lord, shine a candle in the darkness and breathe new joy into our lives. Wind your blessed peace around us until the day when Christ arrives in our hearts. Shine a candle in the darkness and breathe new joy into our lives. For all of this,